Sorry about that. Let me just finish up. What I was saying, well, that's not exciting. That one, let's go there. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so what I was saying is what you get with an aggregate demand curve that you don't get with ISLM is you get the price level. What you lose with the aggregate demand curve is you don't get the interest rate. It is behind the scenes, okay? But knowing that aggregate demand is derived from ISLM, you can infer what the interest rate is, or at least if the price level changes, you know that the interest rate has to go up too.
Is this being recorded?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I remembered for once. Okay, now, the key question here is, how do we interpret the aggregate demand curve? Okay, it's really important that you understand this. So let me drive it home. So let's ask the question, what kind of an equation is the aggregate demand curve? Is it an identity? Aspen, is an identity? Price equals aggregate demand?
I think.
In the same way that EP equals C plus I plus G plus net exports?
No.
No, it is not an identity. Is it a behavioral equation? If you pick the price level, aggregate demand shows you how much total demand there is in the economy.
Yes.
I'm getting a call. Hold on one second. Hello. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm on another line. Can you call me back in like 5 minutes? Thank you very much. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So does everybody agree that it's a behavioral equation? Pick the price level, aggregate demand tells us total spending in the economy, total demand. This is where you say yes or no.
Aye, yes.
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 Top trumps.
Okay, you're all wrong. Think about it. Every point on the aggregate demand curve comes from an intersection between IS and LM. IS and LM are themselves what kind of equation?
Equation?
They are equilibrium conditions, right? Every point on the LM curve shows where the money market is in equilibrium. Every point on the IS curve shows where the product market is in equilibrium. So what do we know about every point on the aggregate demand curve?
It's where LM equals IS.
Correct. Every point on the aggregate demand curve is a combination of price level and GDP, where both the money market and the product market are in equilibrium. So the aggregate demand curve is not a behavioral equation, even though 95% of everybody who studies the aggregate demand curve thinks it is. It's an equilibrium condition. Do you understand? Does anybody have questions about that?
Can you say that again?
Yes. Matthew, you see how every point on aggregate demand corresponds to an intersection between IS and LM?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So whatever's happening on IS and LM is happening on aggregate demand. Okay. So intersections on ISLM show money market and product market equilibrium. So every point on the aggregate demand curve shows money market and product market equilibrium. But instead of looking at the interest rate and nominal GDP, we're looking at the price level and real GDP. Okay, so I can say that differently. Let me just repeat it. The aggregate demand curve shows all combinations of P and Q, where we understand that P is the aggregate price level and Q is real GDP. All combinations of P and Q where the product market and the money market are in equilibrium, so that we know that every point on AD, EP equals Y and money supply equals money demand. Questions?
I've got a quick question.
What's that?
So why is it when we're graphing ISLM, that's nominal GDP, but for aggregate demand curve, that's real GDP?
Because with ISLM originally to this point, we've been assuming that the price level was constant at 1. So nominal and real GDP were the same. Now we're allowing the price level to change. Every time the price level changes, money demand changes and the LM curve shifts. Every time the price level changes, we're going to go to a different point on the aggregate demand curve. Good question. Other questions? Okay, then this ends the ISLM model. I will make the whole PowerPoint available to you this weekend sometime so that you can, you can watch the video again and you can go over the PowerPoint as many times as you want. And I think on that note, I will say the week is done. Enjoy the weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Bet.
Thank you, Dr. Greenlaw. Take care.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you.
Monday.
Thank you.